Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the new cycle of Torah. Oh, fine, thanks. I'm good, thanks. We're after the new cycle of Torah. We're studying Breishis. Bereshis is the first portion of the Torah. We're after Simchas Torah. We're starting a new year, a new beginning, new depth, right? Okay, so we have the Chumash in front of us today, and you asked a question. Keith, what's your question? We have two different Chumashes. Good. Remember, by the way, that whatever you ask about the translation, I don't care about the translation. It's the original that matters. Just let's be clear about that. All right, good. So what's your question?
No, I'm just saying, have this book we're using on.
Yeah, what does it say?
It says, on the first day of creation in the beginning.
Okay.
This one has in the beginning.
No, I'll tell you why. Because they got to understand the difference in these two Chumashim. The blue Chumash is the one that, sorry, the brown Chumash is a direct translation of the original text. The blue Chumash, this one that we use in a shul, the blue Chumash, this one has the direct translation in boldface, with the commentary interpolated in regular face. Do you understand? No, this one, the blue one.
Yeah, I know, I see that. Yeah.
So it's the same thing in the boldface commentary. In the boldface, but the commentary is an addition, right? Okay. So now what I want you to do is please to turn to the story of Adam and Eve eating of the fruit. Eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Let's take a look at this. We're going to turn now, if you have the blue book, here it is. We're on page 19 of the blue book. Yeah, let's take a look at the story. Okay, the Torah now interrupts its description of the events of the sixth day of creation with the account of how Adam and Eve were banished from the Garden of Eden, which occurred after the creation week. In fact, it occurred after Eve's first two births. So it places this narrative here. Now, this is all commentary, by the way. It places this narrative here because, good morning, Dan and Elaine and Lauren. Because the antagonist of this episode, the serpent, initiated the train of events that led to the expulsion after observing Adam and Eve engage openly in marital relations. Why were Adam and Eve engaging in marital relations openly? They had no shame. There was no sense of ego. There was no sense of evil. Everything was holy and pure. The embodiment of evil was the serpent. So they were just pure. They would have relations like we eat carrots. Like there's nothing seductive about eating carrots. There wasn't any ulterior motives. They would do it in public. Like, what's the problem? Now the serpent was the most cunning of all the wild beasts that God had made. He also possessed the means to express his cunningness. He stood upright on his feet, and he could talk. Marty, you made a face. You don't like this, eh?
No, I do like it. It's interesting. It's kind of cool. You know, I have heard that part.
That the serpent could talk, and he was upright. I know some wilde chayas that can talk.
That's true. And they like serpents.
I know people that are less smarter than animals that can talk.
Mm-hmm.
We all know people like that.
Yeah.
Right, okay. After observing Adam and Eve engaging in marital relations, he wanted Eve for his wife. He decided the best way to eliminate Adam was to have him eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge, since God had made this punishable by death. There was only one commandment: eat from all the fruits of the tree of the Garden of Eden, except for that one, because in the day that you eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, you will die. But he knew he would not be able to entice Adam to do this. He decided to work through Eve, whom he assumed would serve the fruit to her husband before she ate any of it herself. Although the serpent had seen Adam and Eve eating all kinds of fruits in the garden, he said to the woman in order to open a conversation, did God really say, you may not eat from any of the trees of the garden? That was his opener. The woman replied, yep, we may eat from the fruit of the trees of the garden. Oh, in other words, the question was, did he say you're not allowed to eat from any fruits of the garden? So this is going to open the conversation. Right. So she said, no, we are allowed to eat. But as to the fruit of the tree of knowledge, which is in the middle of the garden, God said, you must not eat of it, nor may you touch it, lest you die. She threw in there a prohibition which never was prohibited. They were allowed to touch it. In fact, God had not forbidden them to touch the fruit, but Eve thought that he forbade them to eat the fruit because the tree was poisonous. and that touching its bark would therefore prove deadly.
Oh, the serpent pushed.
The serpent pushed Eve against the tree, showing her that touching it did not harm her. He said, "You see, there is no God, right?" He said to the woman, "Just as you did not die from touching it, you will certainly not die from eating its fruit." When Eve saw that touching the tree did not harm her, she could not believe that eating the fruit will kill her either. Now, this is now the law of forbidden fruit, the sweetness of forbidden fruit. In the words of King Solomon, "Mayim gnuvim yimtoku," stolen waters are sweeter than regular waters. If it's forbidden, it means that it's more desirable. Rather, the serpent continued, "God did not forbid you to eat the fruit from your own good, for your own good. That is because he wants you to live forever, and he knows that eating the fruit will make you mortal. That's not the reason. He forbade it out of jealousy. He doesn't want you to infringe upon the aspect of perfecting the world that he has reserved for himself." In other words, the snake said God doesn't want any competition. He doesn't want you to live forever. That's why he doesn't want that. So, in other words, the reason he didn't want you to eat from the tree, the reason is not because he wants you to live forever. God knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened because it's the tree of knowledge. You will become like God. Will be open to your own potential. You will see yourselves as independent agents, masters of your own destiny. You will thus be like God and be able to create worlds just as he did. This is because you will know good and evil subjectively. So in other words, this is very, very complex. The eating of the tree of knowledge will infuse within you knowledge. What does knowledge mean? Knowledge in Hebrew is das. Das is intimacy. Intimacy with good and intimacy with evil. You will become discerners, discerners, discerners. You will be able to engage and to equalize and calibrate between good and evil. Right now, you're just good. But when you introduce evil into your consciousness, you will become deciders of your own fate, masters of your own destiny, freedom of choice to choose between good and evil. And it's that freedom that he wants to deny you because he wants to make you
It
small.
seems like the serpent is the embodiment of Yetzer Hara.
He is the Yetzer Hara.
He is the Yetzer Hara. I mean,
Absolutely, he
so
is the
yeah,
Yetzer Hara.
absolutely.
And in fact, the Yetzer Hara is often called the primordial serpent.
Yeah, I mean, so it seems to me-
The Yetzer Hara is the master of marketing.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
PR,
How terrific it is.
PR par excellence, this guy, right? He knows how to stage it for sale.
How does he relate to the Satan?
So the
Because it
Satan,
seems like they were
the
related.
Satan and the snake is the same thing.
It seems
Why?
like this.
Because the snake, well, the Satan also means the one that misleads you. That's what the snake is doing, is misleading them.
Mhm.
Then he becomes the executioner. The Satan is also the angel of death.
Right.
He's also Malach HaMovis, is also the angel of death. So it's all the same thing. Now, don't forget, Tanya teaches us that the angel of the Satan is a holy angel of God,
Sure.
whose role it is to test you. So let's not shoot the messenger here. The snake was sent by God to test man. So let's not shoot the messenger. He's working for God too. Right? You got me here, right? So the snake is really presenting a he's trying to make it he's trying to misrepresent the instruction, which comes to show you right over here at the very beginning that the minute you begin to play with the Torah, you're going to mess it up. See, God said don't eat from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. She said not to eat or touch. And that was the beginning of the downfall. He pushed against the tree, bam. The minute you start changing the Torah, you're going to destroy the Torah. It's like this Russian Jew translated Shakespeare into Russian, or into Yiddish, actually. So in the title, he wrote Macbeth by William Shakespeare, translated and improved by Moshe Todres. Right? The minute you're going to start improving on the work of God, you lost it all. It's not the work of God, it's the work of Moshe Todres. Right? When God tells you to do something, you do what he told you. Let's talk about your wife. If your wife tells you to go to the store and buy milk, and you decide, I'm not going to buy milk, I'm going to buy heavy cream. Right? And you try to explain to her why heavy cream is better than milk. It's not going to help you, bro. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She wanted the milk. Right?
Mhm.
You do what you asked to do. Now, your wife is your moral equivalent, but God is your moral superior. God's understanding far surpasses our own. So when God tells you to do something which doesn't make sense, like to bind your son upon the altar, he's supposed to do that too. Because he is the origin of goodness, origin of consciousness, origin of existence, right? So this starts to put things into perspective a little bit. When you look at the story of the first sin, how it all began was an over protection of the law. Kol ha'meisif goyreya is a principle in Torah. Whoever adds actually detracts. Whoever adds actually detracts. Now, there are rabbinical law that expand the prohibition of Torah with rabbinical injunction. For example, you're not allowed to eat meat and milk together. So the rabbis added to that also poultry. Also poultry and milk cannot be eaten. Now, nobody's going to tell you that is a
There's your chicken farm.
nobody's going to tell you that is a Torah prohibition. It is a rabbinical safeguard to the Torah. Because if someone's going to tell you that it's a rabbinical that it's a Torah prohibition to eat chicken with milk, then you're going to say, well, it doesn't say it in the Torah, so I'm not going to do anything else, right? You're going to mess it up by adding, right? We have to follow the law of Torah. And maybe, it's a lot like following the GPS on your ways. I don't always understand my ways, but I've learned to listen to ways.
Yeah, trust.
I've learned to, and I don't trust in ways, but I've learned to listen. The app probably knows what it's doing, right? So even though it's taking me a different route, it probably knows that there's an accident miles ahead, right? So when you follow it to the T, that's when you'll get to your destination at the time that they tell you, right? Okay, let's keep on going a little further. Page 21. The serpent persisted in trying to convince Eve, taking care to converse with her when Adam was not present. The guy's smart, super smart, right? He cornered her. He eventually convinced the woman, who then saw that the tree was good for eating because it would make them godlike and desirable to the eyes, because it would open their eyes to their own potential. And that the tree was attractive as a means to gain intelligence because it would enable them to know good and evil subjectively. So she decided to eat the fruit. Now, that was not part of the serpent's plan. The serpent wanted her to give the fruit to her husband first and then tell her to stop. But to the serpent's chagrin, she took some of the fruit herself and ate. When Adam came back, she described the effect of eating the fruit to him and reiterated the serpent's arguments, convincing him to partake as well. Also, even though the serpent had convinced her that the fruit was not deadly, she was still afraid that it might be. And she didn't want to die and leave Adam alive to marry someone else.
What else was there?
You know what Eve did when Adam came home late from work one day? She counted his ribs.
She what?
Counted his ribs.
What does he gave up another one for another blood?
Yeah.
By the way, Rashi tells us it's not ribs. It's the side. Eve was created from the side of man.
Because they were
Back to back, created back to back.
woman together.
Adam knew that the food was prohibited, but he was confused by the fact that Eve, whom God had created to help him, was offering it to him. Rashi says that women know how to convince their husbands to do stuff.
Some do.
That's what Rashi says. He says wives know how to convince their husbands to do things. Thus, Eve also gave some to her husband with her, and because of this confusion, he ate. She also fed to the fruit of the animals, but it did not have any effect on them. Now, Elaine, we're reading this commentary here from the Chumash that we use in the shul, the blue Chumash. Good evening to Debo Jangles in Australia. Gary and Corina, Boker Tov. Corey, I hope you're feeling better. David, good morning.
Goodbye.
Then the eyes of both of them were figuratively open. They suddenly understood that they had lost their original divine consciousness. They were no longer aware of themselves as a part of God, but as independent beings. See, now they had introduced ego. That was the one novelty of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Remember, Tanya chapter 6 defines for us evil. Evil is ego. It is the misperception, the false perception that you can exist outside of God. You can't exist outside of God. It's impossible to exist outside of God. God is not only the original creator of the universe, God is the consistent creator of everything at every single moment in time. This is the doctrine of perpetual creation. A short-sighted, myopic fool can convince themselves that because of the superficial perception of their existence, that they exist independently from God. But that's myopic. That's like someone saying, I am not an American because I don't need America. Right? Now, without America, you probably wouldn't get your head blown off by some enemy nation here. Right? The fact is, you are an American. Right? And whether you like the president or not, right? You're an American. I mean, it's a bit of a weak analogy here, but I'm just trying to say that people like whatever. So point is that God creates us every single moment in time. This is a founding principle of Torah, of Jewish philosophy. In fact, the Rebbe says that there's a statement of the Chabad Rebbes that the way we begin this Shabbos Bereishis, the way we conduct ourselves on this Shabbos influences the entire year. Why? What's the reason for that? The Rebbe explains in a talk that the reason for that is because this idea of the doctrine of perpetual creation, which we learn in this week's Torah portion, your meditation on it and your internalization, your application of that doctrine will change your perception of all your problems this entire year. Yeah. I mean, when you get a letter in the mail or an email that alarms you, if you can catch yourself and say, I have nothing to fear. God is in control and creating me at every single moment in time. God is creating my perceived enemy at this moment, and God is my beloved Father. There's nothing to be afraid of. That perception will influence your entire year to follow, right? So Adam and Eve, so Tanya defines evil as ego, which is the most brilliant and clear definition of evil. It's just ego. It's a sense of selfishness. That's all. Now, Adam and Eve, who now ate from the tree of good and evil, they now had a perception of ego within them. They had a yetzer hara, an evil inclination within them. So until now, they were only a yetzer tov, a good inclination. Now they had both a good and an evil inclination within them. And now they had to oscillate, to differentiate between the good and the evil. Is my thought, speech, and action can express my good or my evil, my selfish or my selfless soul? Tanya is born. What were you saying? Okay, they thus realized that they were figuratively naked, i.e. stripped of the one command that God had given them, which they were precisely to avoid descending to this level of consciousness. So the snake did the snake fail or succeed? He failed in marrying Eve, but he succeeded in his mission, which was to lead them astray as the Satan. The Satan, which is the one that leads you astray. The meaning of the word Satan is astray. And he led them astray. That was his role. He fulfilled the mission accomplished, the mission of God. Tanya tells us that don't be an idiot because God wants you to do the right thing. And your good inclination wants to do the right thing. And even your evil inclination wants you to do the right thing because he's here only to test you. So don't be a fool. Don't drink the Kool-Aid and fail. They sewed together fig leaves. They plucked from the tree of knowledge and they made themselves loincloths. Adam and Eve. Now, this is according to the opinion that the tree of knowledge was a fig. There are three other opinions. One opinion was that it was a grape. No opinions say it was an apple. All agree that it was not an apple.
Who said it was an apple?
That was Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Christian influence. That was not a Jewish influence. It was either a fig or an etrog or wheat. A bread tree. Remember the curse of Adam was that by the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread. It used to be that bread grew on trees, but now you're going to have to work to make it. Right? And the fourth opinion is that it was a grape, a wine tree. They sewed, fine. Adam and Eve would have tried to clothe themselves further, but just then, at 4 p.m., because this was the 10th hour of their day. They were created at 6 a.m. on Friday.
But she already had 2 children. 2 hours. But of course, The way I've always looked at it is God time is different than
No, hang on a second. What was the curse of Eve?
pain of childbirth.
Pain of childbirth, 9 months of childbirth.
Ah,
She gave birth in the same day.
after they
Yeah, they had a relation. She gave birth. It's a big deal.
fast.
There wasn't this whole pregnancy. The pain of pregnancy didn't exist. Bing bam, The fact that you plant a seed in the ground and it takes months or years to grow, that's part of the curse of Eve and Adam. That by the sweat of your brow shall you plant and reap and sow and harvest, right? It used to be bad, right? You know where it happened? In the splitting of the Red Sea. When the Jews split through the Red Sea, it was a messianic consciousness. It was a divine revelation. So if they dropped an apple into the ground, it grew into an apple tree. As it was before the sin of the tree of knowledge, and as it will be when the coming of Mashiach. So they were created at 6 a.m. By 4 p.m., they already had sinned. Now, 7 p.m. was going to be Shabbos. 7 p.m., they were going. No, sorry. Shabbos is going to be at 6 p.m., I'm sorry. Shabbos is going to be at 6 p.m. But they were supposed to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge at 6 p.m. The grape, to make kiddush on it. Ochala for Shabbos.
Wait. Why would they have?
The prohibition of the fruit of the tree of knowledge was only 3 hours. It was a 3-hour prohibition.
They weren't supposed to eat it until Shabbos.
Till Shabbos.
And they were permitted to eat it after Shabbos. During Shabbos, they were permitted to eat it.
Yeah.
And then,
Which is amazing.
I never heard.
That's the Talmud. You got to learn the Talmud. You can't get stuck in the Hebrew school version of Judaism. You know what I mean?
so if they would have eaten it after the time they were supposed to, they would have gotten any ego. And all
Correct.
that.
Timing is everything.
Okay.
It's like a guy. I showed up to the airport. I was at the gate,
Plane left 2 hours.
and the plane left 2 hours before me. Why did they wait? I was at the right place. Timing is everything, my friend. Right? A guy showed up to my wedding a week early. He got the week wrong.
This is another week late.
Yeah. So it's amazing that they had only a 3-hour prohibition, and they still could not restrain themselves. We're going to talk about this. They heard the voice of God, which is moving about in the garden in the direction of the day's end. Attempting to quickly cover their remaining nakedness, the man and his wife hid themselves from God among the trees of the garden. God knew where Adam was, but in order to open the conversation and give him the opportunity to express remorse, he called to the man and he said to him, Ayeka, where are you? He replied, I heard your voice in the garden. I was afraid because I'm naked, so I hid. God obviously knew that Adam and Eve had eaten of the tree of knowledge, but in order to give Adam another chance to confess and express remorse over his sin, he said, who told you that you are naked? What do you mean you're naked? How do you know you're naked? What's the first thing they did after the tree of knowledge? Is they covered their nakedness. Why did they cover their nakedness? Because now they had a sense of self, a sense of ego, a sense of separation from God. Who told you you were naked and that there is any shame in this? Did you eat of the tree which I commanded you not to eat? You obviously did. Otherwise, you would not have felt any shame in being naked. But rather than admitting his error in judgment, Adam rationalized his behavior by blaming God. Now listen to this. David is the ultimate king of Israel, the eternal king of Israel. Saul, his father-in-law, was dismissed with dishonorably. Why? Both Adam and Saul sinned. Adam and Saul, they both sinned in different things. But when Saul was confronted by the prophet of God about sinning, what did he do? He blamed someone else. When David was confronted by God, by the prophet of God for his sin, what did he do? He acknowledged and he expressed remorse and he took responsibility. This is a lesson that we learn right here. God is waiting. It's okay. To sin is human. What God is wanting from you is to acknowledge. Take responsibility. Be a man. Face the music. Stop blaming others.
Great lesson.
We live in a country. Have you ever noticed the politicians that run in America?
Oh,
They're
it's always
flawless.
the other person.
They are
It's
immaculate.
always the other person.
It's always someone else's fault. I'd love to meet a politician that says, I made a mistake. Wow, I think I'd vote for that guy. Just because he's like real.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an actual human being. That's amazing. He's my kind of guy, right? It was the other guy's economy. It was the other guy's tax cuts or tax increases. Someone else's problem. But me, I'm perfect.
Look how good I'm doing for you.
Hey, I made a mistake.
The man replied,
No, they never said I made a
No,
mistake.
but if they did, they would.
so he blames God. The man replied, the woman whom you gave to be with me, the woman, your fault,
Okay.
and help me. She gave me one of the fruits of the tree and I ate. I assumed that since you created her to help me, she would not lead me astray. But by shifting the blame to Eve, Adam only committed a further offense in gratitude for God's goodness in giving him a wife. Nonetheless, because he and Eve expressed remorse and because Adam had at least a partial excuse, God commuted their sentence and did not make them die on the very day that they ate the fruit. He only made them mortal. How long did Adam live? 930.
Years, less
70. 930. It's well said, Marty. God said to the woman, okay.
70 is 4.
He donated to David. God said to the woman, what is this that you have done to the woman? Giving her the chance to realize that it was possible to repent and repair the damage that had been done. But the woman too tried to shift the blame. She replied, the serpent deceived me and I ate. Now, God did not address any question to the serpent as not to allow him to exonerate himself by pointing out that Eve should have had the sense to know that God's command should override the serpent's enticements. He didn't bother asking the serpent because he knew you don't engage with the master of PR. He would have found a way to blame God for this and make God feel really bad about it, right? You know, when asked about engaging in public debates on religion, the Rebbe highly discouraged them because he said that the master of the debate is far less the proponent of truth than it is the master of eloquence. Don't even try, right? You get into a debate with a guy like Richard Dawkins or some of these famous atheists, these Englishmen. Their mastery of English, of wit, is so sharp that they're going to make mincemeat of you, regardless of the truth of your positions, right? Okay, so rather, God said immediately to the serpent, and that's interesting to know, by the way, that the Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and they were complaining to God. The woman that you put here, and there were Jews in Auschwitz that would wake up in the morning and say the morning blessings. You could be in the depths of hell and be grateful, and you could be in paradise and be ungrateful. Think about that for a moment. How many people do you know that live a life of paradise and are miserable? And how many people do you know that living hell and they're cheerful? Hell and paradise are in your mind. I know people that have more money than they know what to do with, but they cannot buy themselves happiness. Okay, rather, God said immediately to the serpent, I distinguished you above the other animals by giving you the power of speech, but you misused it by enticing Eve to sin. Because you did this, I will repay you measure for measure. Oh, you see, I play right there. You learned this. I will entirely rescind your ability to speak, and thus, instead of being the most gifted of animals, you are now the more accursed than all the livestock and all the wild beasts. Not only will you lose your natural ability to speak, you will even lose your ability to make sounds like other animals. Your voice will be reduced to a hiss. Furthermore, I'll take away your feet. You will now move on from now on, move on your belly, and you will appear to eat dust all the days of your life. Thus is an idiom. This is an idiom for being scorned because it has abused its superior gifts that have made it the most preeminent of the animals. The serpent was reduced to being the lowliest animal. When God removed its feet, the serpent screamed. Ouch. Maybe it didn't get an anesthetic on that surgery. I don't know. You wanted to take Eve. Instead, as your wife, I will plant hatred between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He will pound you on your head, and you will hiss as you bite him on the heel. It's interesting. I read somewhere that in the beginning, it was supposed to be that every human being was supposed to have two helpers, two serpent helpers. One doing your local tasks and one doing your FedEx, DHL tasks. Can you imagine? Wouldn't that be awesome? Like two executive assistants to every person.
You're a serpent.
Snake, give me a pizza, please. Oh, yeah, I need to get in Miami. Yeah, go down to Miami. Can you imagine? Wouldn't that be awesome? 2, no 1.
I use Amazon. Sorry.
Yeah, now we have them. Amazon. Yeah, that's good. To the woman, he said, I will greatly increase your difficulty in raising children and your pregnancy from now on. Eve already had children, so she would experience the pain of raising them before the pains of her next pregnancy. This is why God mentioned child rearing before pregnancy and birth. You will give birth to children in anguish. Furthermore, your longing will be even raising children. You know what that is? The pain of raising children? Try a 16-year-old. Try raising a 16-year-old.
I have.
Yeah, that's what I think it's talking about. Little kids, little problems. Furthermore, your longing will be for your husband, but despite your longing for him, he will dominate you. You will be embarrassed to ask him explicitly to have marital relations with you. So in other words, the woman will be submissive to the husband. What does that mean? I don't know. I think what it means is that in the beginning, Eve was the woman was superior to the man. The man was submissive to the woman. Think about it. She tells him to do something, he doesn't. God asked him, why do you do it? He says, what do you mean? Because she told me to. The woman was superior to the man. When Mashiach comes, that will be restored. The woman will be superior to the man. It is an unnatural state of exile where the man is superior to the woman. It's a curse of Eve. He will dominate you, and your longing will be for him. Can you imagine it's the other way around? Interesting. Eishes chayil ateres bailos, says the Torah. A woman of valor will be the crown of her husband, which means that the woman will be the crown, will be over his brain, like higher than his highest faculties. That's a prophecy of the future. And to Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate of the tree about which I commanded you, saying, do not eat from it. The earth from which you were created, and therefore is somewhat responsible for your character, will be cursed because of you. I will simultaneously punish it now for not producing trees whose bark tastes the same as their fruit, which is the way it was supposed to have been. It will produce flies, fleas, and ants. Ichs. Hence is born Terminix and pest control. Because of this, you will produce food from it with difficulty all the days of your life. Can you imagine? Here was born the struggles of livelihood, of earning a living. Let's go to page 22, middle of the page, specifically 22, middle of the page. Specifically, when you plant grain, legumes, or vegetables, the earth, middle of 22. Specifically, when you plant grain, legumes, or vegetables, the earth will bring forth thorns and thistles for you, and you will have to eat the grass of the field, i.e. the thorns and thistles that will grow when you plant grain, because not enough grain will grow for you to live on. You have to cook these weeds and eat them. This situation persisted until Noah's generation. Noah actually introduced, he invented the plow. So, and all sorts of tools for weeds and stuff. So that's why his name was Noach, which means pleasant, because he brought calm and serenity to people that were bleeding because they were like trying to. Let's just do one last piece of here. One last piece, Kim. You're gonna finish it up on page 25. Last few lines. You will eat bread only by the sweat of your brow until you return to the ground, for you were taken from it. For you are dust, and as you will now be mortal, you will return to dust. This is the command of burial. At this point, the world descended from its original lofty, pristine state, spiritual state. The major purpose of life from this point on became to rectify the effects of Adam and Eve's sin and restore reality to its original state. That concludes the narrative. Just two comments I want to share with you. Number one is that until this situation persisted, until the Torah was given on Mount Sinai. When the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, that's when the sin was rectified and God was reintroduced back into this world. But through the sin of the tree of knowledge, or the sin of the golden calf at Mount Sinai, it got screwed up all over again. God expelled himself all the way back up to heaven. And when Mashiach comes, we will bring God back down to this earth. That's the purpose of our existence. One more thing I want to say to you is that the sin of Adam and Eve was just a 3-hour prohibition. Why could they not restrain themselves? The answer the Rebbe tells us is because the more important your job, the more provocative the evil inclination will make it. The more difficult it will be for you to succumb, to overcome your temptation. So if you look in your life, the things that are struggles for you, think about that. Where you struggle with in your life, your addictions, your predispositions, your attractions, Think about that. The reason why you are drawn to those things is because the evil inclination knows what your soul's mission is upon this earth. And even though it seems so trivial, it's a little sin. Doesn't matter. At fruit for 3 hours, it doesn't seem like a big sin. Look, it changed the course of human history for all time, right? Child rearing, livelihood, agriculture, rodents, all that stuff, right? Mortality. Your evil inclination knows exactly what your mission upon this earth is. He's going to make that difficult for you, right? Some people have it's impossible for them to give charity. Cannot give charity. They can't give charity. That's their mission. Other people, they cannot walk into a shul. They'd rather give a check. Other people, they cannot be nice to their wife. Other people, they cannot keep their hands off of other wives. Whatever the case is. You identify. This is reverse engineering. You identify what is your challenge, and there you will find your purpose. The reason why Adam and Eve could not overcome the temptation is because this was so critical to their existence. This command of 3 hours of not eating the fruit, the evil inclination ramped up the temptation factor all the way to full throttle, and they couldn't handle it. When you see the full throttle in your temptation, that's when you know your soul's purpose is upon this earth. Shkoyach, folks. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me today.
That was really good.
Great. This was a great.